is that when representation exists, you kind of have an understanding of like what a path for your life is supposed to look like. Like that's kind of the point of having good representation. And then it gives other people a guide for how to like interact as well with you, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Trans people have very varying opinions about my takes on the wheel, but I'm glad to hear that you like
I
them.
don't know. It's tough. I don't know. The whole discourse is so busted. We really just run into like like I was watching like that What Is a Woman watch through that you were doing yesterday, Destiny. I checked in on parts of that.
Yeah.
I know. The whole discussion is just so utterly pointless. It's nothing but just this semantic barrier that people don't want to like you
But
have
it's
to like
not
engage with good.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. The problem isn't that it's pointless, it's that nobody really has a desire to engage in that conversation. Like, honestly, like it's just people, they come with their preconceived ideas of what's right or wrong, and then they're just trying as hard as they can to ham fist in.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it makes it very fucking frustrating, yeah.
It's super frustrating. It's almost like both sides are going into the argument with their conclusion already reached, and then, you know, it's so, I don't know. And I just think there's this big issue where it's like, semantically, we use the word like what is a woman? What's that question, right? Like we use that word both ways. Like I think most of the time when people talk about it, people are talking about the sex distinction, female, right? That's what colloquially throughout history, that's what it's primarily been used for. But it's pretty obvious there's cases where it's clearly a social description as well, which just further shows that, you know, there's multiple patterns going on there, multiple descriptions going on, and that's why I think it's mostly a semantic issue, because it's like one side is 100% convinced that woman 100% means the word female, and the other side is like, well, yes, female is a thing, but like women also has other implied meanings, and the fact that they can't even see that that's happening, it's like that conversation is literally a colossal waste of time.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'd agree there. I think I'd even fight that. I think the majority of the time we're referring to men or women, we're usually referring to like gendered expectations. Like I think it's actually very rare that we're ever actually referring to like genitalia or chromosomes. Like when you say like act like a man, act like a woman, or this is a dress for a woman, for instance. Like the dress could be for anybody, right? If you're really talking body shape stuff, but yeah, like nobody has.
What I mean to say, for example, is like if someone's like, oh yeah, like there's this woman, like your brain is instantly putting a sex in there. You know what I mean? Like we use it kind of both. I agree with what you're saying there. Like sort of we do use it as a proxy for like the cultural and social role, but I also think like there's a lot of situations where when people are just speaking quickly and broadly, like we use that term to also express like biological sex as well.
Yeah, potentially, yeah, true. There's a woman in the hospital now, you probably wouldn't say like that's a female biologically sex. Yeah, you're sure.
Right. So I think, and that's the thing, is I think because those are just interchangeably used, and there's not really just like, oh, what is a woman? Because it's like, that's like asking a word that has like two, you know, like what is ice? Someone would say, oh, well, it's frozen water. And someone's like, actually, no, it's some diamonds on my wrist.
Sure.
You know? So.
Or it's, I really, really, really like, I know that like, it's, I don't know how much you watched me watching it, but Jordan Peterson like gave.
I couldn't sit through all. I was stunned how fucking long and just.
It was long. Well, I mean, it's definitely like an entertaining
so
piece,
stupid.
but Jordan Peterson actually gave, like, he was being a smartass, but he actually gave probably some of the best answers in terms of like what is a woman and all of that. Like at one point, but it's funny because they're playing the right music to make it look like, oh, well, he's giving the right answer, but like he's asked the question of like, well, what is a woman? And he's like, well, I don't know. Why don't you go out and look or whatever, like that, right? Which is really implying a lot of social constructivism. I don't even know if it's intentional or not. But he never gives like a clear answer either, which is. You know, which I thought was really, really, really funny. But then, like, when the other lady, there's like the first lady that played is like a smiling therapist lady, and it's like, well, what is a woman? And she's like, well, the answers varied throughout a lot of, like, her answer is made to look crazy when Jordan Peterson is essentially given the same answer, which I thought was really funny.
I thought the music was funny too. Like anytime they'd bring on like the quote unquote gender ideologists or whatever, like they'd play like the spooky music, like they're trans and the kids, and then like they'd put the conservative lady on, and it's just like classical music and shit. Like, see this individual of reason. But yeah, I don't just want to talk about trans stuff. I want to include Aella, so yeah.
Fuck Aella.
I know. It's okay. I'm happy to not talk most of my time talking anyway.
And you know, I had this situation. I was with this girl last weekend, and she's like not political, whatever. She's just a total normie. And you know, we're friends and we're talking, and she kind of started asking me some like questions that are like in like what is a woman, like so do you identify as a woman? Do you think you're female? Like, she started asking me these questions. I was kind of surprised because like it hasn't really came up in our friendship. And so I kind of like broke it all down. And, you know, one of the things that I tried to explain to her is like, okay, let's imagine like she is biologically female or whatever, right? Let's say she wakes up tomorrow and no matter how hard she like pleads or whatever, like everyone perceives her as a man, everyone interacts with her as a man. Like in that situation, like how is her material reality outside of obviously like a procreative aspect or like certain like physiological health differences, how is her material condition any different from someone who is like, you know, male assigned at birth but now is like living in society that certain way? Like obviously there's the collective experience which is different, so the socialization plays a big factor, but in terms of how people are actually treating you, it ends up being the same, right? It's like there's not that distinction between like the biology and like the lived sort of class or like the social thing, that like that melts away so fast in reality, which is why it's so like pathetic that people are like, oh, what are you really, you know?
I think the challenging part about it though is that like if you were a sophisticated interlocutor, I think one could argue that that's a bit of an intuition pump, because I think what people might say actually is like the idea of waking up and feeling that way is impossible if you're biologically a male or female, I think is what the response would be.
Yeah, well, my argument to that would be like, well, I don't think I like feel female or feel like a woman. Like, I don't even know what the fuck that means. I don't think no one knows what another person feels, because what we feel is inherently an internal process. So what I do know is that when I exist as masculine or have male features, or those features show in such a way that people can clearly like see I'm, you know, male, that to me internally causes a tremendous amount of distress. Like, even if I were like not in society, like if I was just in my bedroom looking at myself or inhabiting my body, like I'll give an example. I actually went off hormones for the first time in 8 years in the fall, because I was trying to freeze my reproductive tissue, because I do want to have children one day. And so during that process, like I did masculinize a little bit, and sure enough, like I haven't had really bad dysphoria for probably 3 years, 4 years. And like within like the first like month, it was fine. I didn't have dysphoria. Being on testosterone, it was totally cool. Second month, it was fine. It was totally cool, whatever. But that's because like the masculinizing effects hadn't like really kicked in or whatever. And then like around like months 3, 4, like where I started to get to the end of the process, you know, I like my dysphoria came like raging back. Like when I would see like chest hairs or like little things that, and that's not to say like, oh no, women have chest hair, but it's just like I know like what like sex expressing features my body has, and when those like aren't like feminine expressing, it just makes me fucking want to like go crazy. So I don't really feel like, oh, I am female, or oh, I, you know, feel like a woman. I don't really even know what those are. I just know that I have this material harm that happens when I exist as this other state, so I'm, you know, regulating my body to the other state so that I can live a more peaceful existence, you know? And I think that's lost, and I think that gets lost in the discussion as well, because obviously like the mental health landscape of trans people is really rough. So we obviously feel like affirmative care or like identity affirmation is like really important, especially with all the discrimination. And so, but I mean, that has to like kind of pause somewhere when you enter like the public domain of like, you know, reason and argument, because like I'm not female. I could make an argument in a case that, you know, I've managed to sort of synthetically intersex my body to like 50-60% female or 40% or some arbitrary percentage, because I can change my secondary sex characteristics, I can change my endocrinological sex characteristics, right? But I mean, there is like, you know, as you said, when you're arguing in favor of trans stuff, like, you know, you've talked about how there's an underlying fact of the matter with gender dysphoria. I also tend to agree with that. I don't think that every trans experience or whatever is like the same, but I do think there's a central group that tends to have this like pattern that you're talking about. And I think that like I forgot what I was saying. I got distracted. Sorry, but yeah. Anyway, those are my general thoughts on it.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I just think the whole topic has been so blown up with bad faith and just stupid shit that it's now not even there's no point in talking about it. I think the worst thing that isn't talked about is how, like, at least for me as a trans person who's been living and passing in my life for a while, the thing that I've ultimately learned is that, like, the big challenge is that there isn't a pre-established channel for communication or interaction. Like, when I think about, like, gender to me, like, societal gender or whatever, it's really a communication channel. It's a set of archetypes and communication patterns that we all like understand so that we can interact quickly and make generalizations and move through the world fast. And I feel like that communication channel, there hasn't been communication channels that have built for people like me. So for example, like when I'm like growing up or whatever, or when someone's growing up, they're like thinking about what their future partner is going to be like. Oh, my wife, my husband, whatever, right? Like there isn't like a third channel out there. So like there's no one who grew up thinking about like me or my body or wanting to be with me or like whatever, right? And I think that that lack of communication channel is what creates a lot of this problem in the debate, because it's like, you know, there should be another channel of expression that's not just like purely male or female or purely like man or woman, but like, you know, like male and woman, or female and and man, and like, I don't know, and other patterns. Those rough terms to try to describe that, but I just think that yeah, like dating's weird, because like if I date a guy, like that is okay, but then like something kind of happens. If I date like a girl, they'll be really into me, but then like they'll start to view me as their friend, because there's not like this like established long-term dating communication channel around this. So I don't know. I hope that we could probably bypass a lot of the argument if we just had like a way to, I don't know, capture people's experiences outside of a binary.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of like the argument, really the most generalized form of an argument for representation, right? Is that when representation exists, you kind of have an understanding of like what a path for your life is supposed to look like. Like that's kind of the point of having good representation. Yeah. And then it gives other people a guide for how to like interact as well with you, right?
Because these days, like my earliest childhood attraction was towards men, or towards other, you know, boys at the time. But like I feel like I can't ever like really commit, or like I can't really be with a guy long term, because I feel like there's something about like their expectations and like I don't know, I feel like I can't find that. So I've kind of regulated myself to sort of dating women, cis women generally, but you know, whatever, I don't really discriminate, but like and that's been an interesting experience, because what I find is that a lot of cis women are actually like in terms of their sexuality, they don't really care. Like they'll be down to get with a girl, get with a guy, and in terms of like their romance, that's where it's like I don't even think a lot of the cis women I've dated, I don't even think they're necessarily like it seems like they're not even really attracted to like men. It seems like they're more attracted to what men do and what that channel of communication and that channel of interaction does. So like if that channel is there, but like it's not like a man or something, that it still like does the same thing. I don't know. It's hard to articulate, but I don't know. I'm rambling. I had to delete a color. Which one would you delete?
Orange.
Why orange?
Why?
What would you delete?
Well, no, justify orange.
Wait, orange first. Yeah. What?
There's a lot of like shitty colors out there. Why would you delete orange?
What? Wait,
which
one?
Racist. I feel like white people kind of need orange to like.
Jesus.
You know.
What about like puke green? Or what about like even like brown or yellow? Like those colors kind of suck.
Yellow is wonderful. Go fuck yourself.
I feel like yellow, orange, and brown are like the same thing. They're just like different contexts. Am I wrong?
Those are all bad colors, but orange is like the least bad of all of those, I think.
Wait. So you're saying yellow is worse than orange?
Yeah, easily.
I don't think yellow is a real color, personally. Like,
wow.
I think like yellow primary is a real color, but like I feel like yellow, like what? Just take yellow, and then just introduce black into it, and tell me what it does. Like yellow's not a real color. You know what I mean?
What do you pee?
It's like yellow. A yellow. I piss clear. I drink water. What are you peeing? You need to hydrate more, Aella.
I definitely pee yellow.
Dehydrated. That's what that means. No, I would probably get rid of I'd probably get rid of that really nasty dark yellow. So we're actually kind of in a similar place where it's like if you take yellow, like a bright yellow, and then you just start to collapse the value on it, you end up with this like kind of nasty, like, I don't know. The brain just views like dark yellow is wrong, because like our brain like tends to perceive like yellow as like added white or whatever, or like an added brightness. Like for example, if you're in painting, like blues will like darken things, like yellows will like brighten things. Obviously, there's different balances there, and I feel like just taking yellow darker always just makes it look like trash. So, yeah, I would get rid of dark yellow.
Would you say perhaps it looks orange?
Ooh, okay, okay. I would say it starts to look orange. However, I would say orange has a bit more red, a bit more primary red in it. So that would be my distinction. And I feel like if you're in that dark yellow area that makes it turn rusty coppery looking or whatever, and then you just push the fader a little bit to the red side, then you basically just get brown. And I think brown's pretty decent.
So you get rid of yellow. Is that your final answer?
Yeah, I think I'd get rid of yellow. Or no, dark yellow. A specific value. I don't think I could get rid of a specific, like, what's it, a hue? Or I think that's what it's called. But I think I could get rid of a specific value relative to a hue, I think. I could be using color terms where I'm not like an optical.
Do you think it's possible to fake yourself onto your own porn?
Fake yourself onto your own porn.
Possible. When you say possible, you mean like
yeah.
you'd like enjoy it, or
Oh.
are you like do you mean just like technically possible? Wow, Catman, thanks for the
Technically,
50
like, you know when you deep fake some faces onto other people's bodies, can you like deep fake your own face on your own body?
Yeah, I think so.
Probably, yeah.
Like, I feel like if the technology's there, are you thinking about a way to like? I feel like someone could use that to like make like OnlyFans content without actually filming.
Yeah, but you want to know the problem.
That's
I was just using my body anyway.
That's funny.
Wait, the what? What's the problem?
There's that going whether or not deep fake porn with me and someone else will be released, like a predictor market, and I'm like, oh, we should make that. But like, if you're making it, how do you deep fake your own porn? I don't know.
Question for you, Aella. If you are filming porn with someone, and then you deep fake your face onto their body, and you deep fake your face onto your body, would you say like you are having sex with yourself in that product, or would you say that,
Separately, you just made me realize I should probably make a porno with them, and then we just swap our faces onto each other's bodies. That would probably be great.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But I was just do you feel like that categorically means that you're like fucking yourself if you have like a deep fake that's fucking you that is you, or do you feel like the you fucking yourself happens purely in the realm of like the physical reality where you filmed it, or does it happen in the conceptual reality of like the content? I guess what I'm trying to
I don't think it would. If you saw a video with you fucking yourself, would you be like, oh, I have fucked myself?
I certainly wouldn't know.
Yeah. Somebody once, I feel like I met a person at an art project where you would wear goggles that gave you the view of the other person you were having sex with at the same time. So you could like be having sex while seeing through the other person's eyes. Wouldn't that be so cool?
That would be really. I don't think I'd want that actually. I think I like sex through my eyes. I like looking at the other person. Do you think? How about here's a question for you. Do you think if you like could like perfectly duplicate yourself, and then you fuck yourself? Is that like would you fuck yourself if you could like perfectly clone yourself? Would that be any different than masturbation? Do you feel like if the clone was created momentarily at a different time and place, they would instantly have like a new identity since they're a separate person? What sort of where does that break down? Is it masturbation?
That's like three different extremely vast questions.
Okay.
One like would having sex with an identical twin be masturbation?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that would be no, that would not be masturbation. I think that would be incest, and I also think that would be because it's a separate individual, right? There's a different sentient, conscious individual on the other end of it. So I don't think that would be masturbation. No.
Okay, but if you duplicate yourself, do you think that there is another sentient, conscious individual or not?
I do. Yeah, I think that. If they were, I think if we were to somehow perfectly duplicate consciousness, like if I were to somehow just be able to press a button and just duplicate my consciousness elsewhere, I think it would instantly become a different consciousness because like it's in a different spatial area. It'll instantly start having different life experiences. So I think like the cumulative or like net similarities between my identity and that identity will be very close. And I think there's maybe an argument that like for like a picosecond of time, it is me. But then I think like the moment like the different experiences start to like come through, then I think eventually it has like a different thing.
Okay, so it wouldn't be masturbation.
In that sense, I don't think it would be. Yeah. Do you think it would be?
No, I don't think it makes sense for other beings to be conscious. So yeah, I think it'd be just as much masturbation as having sex with someone else is.
Hmm.
Wait, if you cloned yourself, you don't think the other being would be conscious? Is that what you said?
Well, in the same way that you're not conscious.
Well, I mean, I was under the assumption that I was, so I don't know what you mean by that.
Yeah, but there's a
How
way
can
in
you
which you
prove
are
it, though?
kind of similar. Like, there's a way in which I'm not, from your perspective.
So you're not really asking if somebody's conscious. You're asking if somebody can perceive somebody else as conscious.
Hmm.
But the answer to that is always no, regardless if it's a clone or anything, right? Or am I missing
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, I mean, somebody is
kind of-
just a thing that's like behaving in a way that seems to remind you of yourself. That's like basically what we think consciousness is in other people.
Huh. You think so? I tend to think when I think about consciousness in other people, like that's definitely, I guess, a big part of it, obviously. But I think if I'm being tasked with determining if something is conscious or sentient, I'm really looking for interaction and engagement that like seems to indicate some synthesis or new generative material. That's obviously very hard to delineate from AI. I know I've tried to explore different things. I think the boundary there is fuzzy, but I don't think it's necessarily looks as if it's having a similar experience. I just think that that's what it ends up like manifesting as externally, but like internally, I think when we're trying to gauge sentience, we're trying to like I guess you're right. Never mind. I take back what I just said. You're right. Huh. I hadn't thought of it like that. Huh. I guess that is how we evaluate consciousness, huh? We just kind of mirror what we do, and if that aligns with what we do, then we call it conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just changed my mind on that.
Oh, cool. Nice.
What was the last thing you changed your mind on, position-wise?
It depends on how big. Bigger things happen less frequently.
Yeah, let's say like a medium to large size one, because if it's like really small, you probably won't even be able to like know, because that changes all the time or whatever. And if it's like super big, then you'll have to like think too long. So like, how about like a medium position that you've had that you felt like you've walked back or changed over time?
Well, I used to think AI was not going to destroy the world, and now I think it is probably going to destroy the world. That's probably the biggest change recently. What about you?
I think the thing I've changed my mind on the most, or a big change would be I feel like I changed my opinion on religion again. When I was a lot younger in my like teen years, I was very much like a militant atheist, like one of the like cringy, like whatever, like that was like the 2007, 2008 type like anti-religious, secular thing, right? That's where I like developed a lot of like my debate and like rhetoric abilities, because I would just go around and argue against religious people like all day long as like a 15, 16-year-old kid. And but then my opinions changed to like
It doesn't look like
really
a...
respect and have like admiration for religion. I view like spiritual experiences as like a form of like or I view like religion as like a form of like human technology that allows us to access like the spiritual thing that we all have the capacity for, and I think is profoundly beneficial for us. But then I feel like now in the last 2 years, my opinion on religion has changed again, and now I think it's like open season on shitting and making fun of religious people. So I don't know. I feel like that's kind of walked back. Yeah, just because I feel like. Go ahead. Yeah.
Correlated at all with your like closeness to religious people?
Not exactly. I grew up in a very religious area, very conservative Midwest town of 99.9% Caucasian, So like I grew up in a super conservative area. But I think the main thing that's changed is that I used to feel like in 2017 or in 2007, 2008, 2009, when I was like dumping on religion, I was doing that sort of in reaction to how they were trying to like eliminate evolution from schools, and they were trying to basically claim like creationism has like a reasonable, rational argument that should be taught alongside evolution, which that's not a tenable position. So I'd argue that a lot back then. But then what's really changed for me in the last 2 years is like I feel like in like let's say like 2010s, like yeah, religious people were doing crazy stuff. They're always doing crazy stuff. But I feel like generally, if it seemed like secularism had like balanced a little bit more. And I feel like now in the last like 2 years, really since the whole Trump thing and like the reaction of the post-Trump thing, I really feel like we're moving in this like theocratic like route, and that's always been there. That's always been in the the more conservative party, but I think like it's getting a lot more extreme, like where you have people like like believing that the Democrats are ontologically like actual satanic demons. That's always been around, but now it's like the level of extreme on that is increasing a lot, and so I think that's why it's important to. I've changed my position to now being a lot more openly hostile towards organized religion, just because I think there needs to be more of a secular voice that's like speaking out against like theocracy, basically. Does that
True.
make sense?
And it was the same basic principle behind why people are so tolerant of Islam.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is,
True.
like in like 2007, 2008 or whatever, I was like kind of edgy about something, right? And then in like 2012, 2013, like I was like so like, oh, it's like Islamophobia, like don't say. And like obviously like Islamophobia is real, and like especially after like 9/11, it was really really quite bad, just because of like the situation and such. But I do feel like this idea of like Islamophobia has been like used as like sort of like a convenient like board reset to be like obfuscate very reasonable criticisms of Islamic policies in countries. Obviously, there's not like a singular Islamic policy, but like the way that different cultures have implemented those policies. I also think that's true of yeah. I also think that's true of other. I'm trying to. There was something else I had, but yeah. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Oh, I also think that's true of like the whole like, for example, on Twitter, I criticized like the CCP, and I got like like mobbed by like tankies and stuff. I don't know. I mean, my initial post was a bit inflammatory, so I get like why it was more of a controversial take. But I just feel like the same thing happens there, where it's like you can have totally reasonable criticism of like the CCP, and then like left it or like, and then I feel like like different individuals will like utilize the like the left's like knee jerk reaction to like be so to like so inclusive, to where it's like you can have a reasonable critique of like the Chinese Communist like party, and then someone will literally like, oh my god, you're just being xenophobic, you're being racist. Like no, like I think you're being racist because you're literally equating like the Chinese government to like Chinese people, like it's insane. And I think that we do the same thing with like the Islam, or we like, do the same thing with different like religions or different groups, where it's like you can like totally have fair criticisms about this group without that being a thing. I also think that's true with like trans people, right? Like people are so quick to be like, oh, like that person's like transphobic. It's like, look, I think there are some reasonable like discussions to be had about the way that like trans people fit into society and like what that means. And I don't think that just entertaining those makes you like, evil. And I think that that's shows up everywhere.
Yep, I think I agree.
Do you make any art? Like music or visual stuff? I think your like polls are artwork, but the other stuff.
I mime. I don't know if that counts.
You mime?
Like
How'd you get into that?
like mime. Like you like there's an invisible wall, and you put your hands on the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what it is. How'd you get into it? Or what got you into it?
Porn.
Oh,
I ended up doing a
interesting.
bunch of sex miming stuff that turned into real miming.
Have you ever had a client that like their kink was just like, babe, don't touch me. I just want you to fucking mime that you're just getting me off or something like that?
Believe it or not, I've never had a man ask me to pretend to jack his dick off while not actually jacking his dick off.
Got you. Okay. Do you ever have anyone who's solicited your services just to be like denied? If that makes sense, like people who are like, who like pay for your service but don't actually like do all the physical stuff, but just like are more into like being cucked or whatever?
Actually, no. Generally, I'm not sure where the selection effects are happening, but I seem to mostly get vanilla people um, in sex work, like as an escort. I think it's like a little wilder online, but if you're seeing people in person, it's pretty straightforward. Like the top, like standard deviation of kink, whatever. Like this, the first like couple categories.
What would you say is the most like surprising, or I'd say weird, but I know you don't really like think of like kink stuff as like necessarily weird, but like what would you say is like the weirdest or most like off color, off the wall like thing that you've been solicited for in your sex work?
It hasn't really been that bad. I think like one of my favorites, it's just, I find it amusing. It's okay. Some fetishes are funny. Okay. I respect a fetish. I don't mean to make fun of them, but sometimes you're just in it. And when you're not being aroused by it, you're like, it's very funny. Like this guy wanted me to, his fetish was a girl dropping a towel, and this was online. And so he would have me like enter the room like with a towel on, and I would have to like, I'm clumsy. I dropped the towel. I'm like, oh no. And I had to pick the towel back up. I had to keep doing it. So it wasn't just like one towel drop. It was like it was like a full 10 minutes of me continually like I just couldn't hold on to the towel. I was like I had to figure out new ways to drop the towel over and over again, and I just just like by the end of it I was feeling such an idiot.
That is fucking
He was just like jerking off really hard. I wish him the best. I'm happy he got to fulfill his fetish.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fucked up that you're outing Destiny. So, he just mentioned that in
Super
chat.
inappropriate, Zheanna. Not a good joke. Wow, way to go. Yikes. Why say that, fam? You just ascended to Lycan level. Good job.
Do you encounter one thing I'm kind of curious about is that when you were talking earlier about trans people being like real or something, sometimes people on my Twitter, like the conservatives, are very angry, and they're like, people are just doing it for attention, and like I don't know, transsexuality, at least based on the survey that I did, which is quite large. I have like 10,000 trans people responded, trans women specifically, and even more trans men. But they seem to have like a very distinct sexuality or a sexual orientation. Like I could probably easily predict if somebody is transgender by looking at the things that turn them on.
And
this seems to be very hard to fake socially. Like people don't really get socially conditioned into being aroused by something. And to me, this seems like extremely hard evidence. Also, other things like trans people have much higher rates of autism and schizophrenia. Like it just seems like a different kind of brain structure that is correlating with these things. Anyway, so you must have a lot of experience.
Disproportionate ADHD too. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I mean disproportionate everything. Honestly, like everything is higher at higher rates than cis people.
Yeah.
Especially being a cunt on fucking Twitter. True.
I mean, I tend to agree with you. I wouldn't necessarily say like it's just like sexuality based, but I do think, at least in my experience, I've worked with thousands of trans people at this point, and I mean, what I've come away with is that, like, first off, it doesn't seem like there's like a singular like experience. Of course, that wouldn't make any sense as a person. I think there's probably people in the trans community who transition for, they just kind of want to, and it's more of like a transhumanist thing where it's more of like, I'm just choosing to do this. Whatever, I'm allowed to do that. Okay, fine. I think then there's individuals who transition because they have like a lot of dysphoria. I think there's individuals who transition out of kind of convenience. I don't know. I think there's just a lot of different functions. I think that, for example, we've seen in literature, like, people who were exposed to like different like DES in like the 70s, like the mothers who were exposed to that, like their children have like much higher rates of intersexuality and transgender identity. So I sort of feel like there is something there that's happening, or multiple things. I don't think it's one thing, and I think this is what probably bothers me the most about the discussion is it's like conservatives like really want it to be just like, oh, this person's got mental, this person has like, trauma. You know what? There probably are people who have transitioned because of trauma. There probably are. I mean, it would be insane to think that there isn't at least one case of a person doing something for some reason, right? It just doesn't make any sense to like draw a hard line there. But I do tend to see kind of patterns. And what you're reporting, or what you're seeing there, I do tend to see as well. There's a lot of like trends and patterns. It's hard to say if that's necessarily because they're trans, Or when you're trans, your life experience is specifically different. So you end up, that then your environment then cultivates different interests and cultivates different patterns of being and interacting.
One thing
as
that's
you move through your life.
very frustrating that people make this mistake a lot is people make the mistake of conflating biological with present at birth. So people will be like, oh, well, is being trans biological? Like, are you born with it, or is it something that you get indoctrinated with or something too? And it's like, you could have like a kind of like a proclivity towards something or a predisposition towards something that is eventually like environmentally like kind of happens at an early age. So you're not necessarily born with it, but it could still be like a combination of like environmental or even biological factors. But just because it's happening somewhere in development, it doesn't necessarily mean it's insidious either. Like, for instance, it could be the case that a gay guy is somebody that ends up like modeling off of the mother more than the father through no like weird, horrible things. Maybe the child just spends more time with the mom or something, right? Like, that could be the case. But conservatives always present it as like you're either born gay or somebody like brainwashed you into it. And there's like no kind of in between stages, which is a little bit annoying, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, strong agree. In general, I find that childhood seems to have very little impact on sexuality as an adult.
Do you really think so?
According to the questions I asked.
One of the things that kind of worries me that's really hard, I think we've talked about this before, Aella, but like it's the idea that when you go to tell your own story, it can be really hard to figure out why things are the way they are sometimes. I think unless you do a lot of like very, very, very specific diving with like third party corroboration on like somebody's life. So like, for instance, if somebody were to say like, oh, like, why is it that for me, like, why is it that you grew up very independent? I might say, well, I think that's probably because I spent a lot of time away from my parents. Like, maybe that was the case, but maybe there's something like a lot more innocuous in my childhood. For instance, like your parents bought you toys that like rattled. Like, maybe that's actually a thing that sets children off to being more independent because other children run away from them when they hear the noise, right? But you would have like no fucking idea that that's what's causing it. So instead, your brain naturally like tries to fill in the gaps with a whole bunch of other things. Like, oh, I played Japanese role-playing games and all the main characters are schizoids. That's why I'm independent. But maybe that's not an influence at all, you know?
Right. I mean, like it's possible that like specific experiences are causing fetishes in a totally non-correlated way.
Yeah.
Like there's no predictivity. Like the rattle causes it for you, but not anyone else ever in the world. And all of these things just like never show up in a pattern.
Sure.
And to be fair, I did ask, I think, like 40 questions about childhood, and none of those correlated with things in adulthood. Generally speaking, some small exceptions. So it's possible that there's in fact something else that I did not ask about.
Could you give us some information on the sample size?
Excuse me?
What was the sample size on that one in particular? I'm just curious. So I can
550,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's possible that like there's something going on that I didn't catch, but like even if it is like more specific, even if it's like I would expect to see at least a little bit of it caught in one of the questions. Like maybe like the true thing is like it's the rattling that happens. And we would expect to see like a really strong correlation with like a specific fetish, but like I would expect to see like a slightly smaller correlation. Like maybe rattles occurred in a house with like higher income, because people were more able to buy it, and so you would see like a higher, even if it's like a weaker one. Like you'd see weaker but a present one. I don't know. It's just you would expect to kind of see it like trickle down somewhere else in the data, and it's like a little surprising to me that like that doesn't seem to be the case mostly.
Do you feel any of the fetishes or kinks you have now you can trace back into your childhood? Did you have those same like sort of proclivities? Maybe not necessarily sexual, but...
Oh, one of them feels like... Yeah, I mean, basically no. Like, one of them, it's like some of my earliest memories are just being like disproportionately fascinated. And another of them, there's like one incident in my childhood that I always like kind of assumed was the thing that caused it. But like after doing my survey and not finding any correlation, so I expected them to, I sort of downgraded hypothesis. Like, I think I'm just like, I just think people like reverse engineer their narratives a whole lot. Like, if you're into something, then you sort of go back in time and find all of the circumstances where this happened in your childhood to be like, that must be where it started. Whereas like realistically, you would just like be much more aware of things that are more salient if you're already into them. So it's like easier to go back and form a narrative, Oh
yeah, this is like restating like what I'm saying. Like people go back and say this caused me to do that, but it might not be the case at all, right?
Yeah, you just are more likely to notice that story.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really annoying around things that research kind of shows is probably like not true at all. So like for instance, like a lot of people might grow up and be really successful and disciplined, of like, oh well, I think it's because my parents beat me. Like that's definitely the thing that caused it. And it's like, if anything, that could have been actually an inhibiting effect or hampering effect on your life, but like for other reasons you ended up enduring and doing well anyways. But then those types of people come out and they say like, well, this was good for me, you know. It's one of the reasons why like this sounds really mean, but I really hate people that like give success stories and then other people try to like copy off of that, because there's probably a lot of really unique circumstances for why somebody becomes successful. But people think that if they just copy all of these like kind of superficial things that another person did, that that's going to lead them down the path of success, when that person that is successful might be missing like everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think I have to go.
Okay.
It's late.
Be careful, buddy.
It's
I
nice
should
talking to
probably-
you guys.
Yeah, it was nice chatting with you and nice meeting you. I should probably get going too. I have some work I need to be doing right now that I'm procrastinating on.
Nice.
I think I'm
Wait.
gonna go dance tonight though.
Yeah,
What's up?
do that. I asked you the question earlier about dancing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about singing?
I love singing.
No. Do you think everybody that plays music should be able to sing a little bit?
Yeah, I do actually. But I don't think should. Okay, well, ought or should. I don't, there's a difference.
Both.
Right. Okay. So, well, I would say no, just for, okay. I don't want to take a singular hardline stance, because like there could be someone, for example, who has an issue with their larynx, or who literally can't produce sound. Or
Fuck
has,
them.
like,
You know what we call them?
All right. So now that we've got
Percussionists.
those that's funny. Okay. Now that we've got the French case taken care of, and we can talk generally. Yeah, I think that every musician should sing, and I think the point shouldn't be that they're trying to have great tone. I mean, have you heard Keith Jarrett? Right? He's like,
He's like one of my favorite musicians of all time. Yeah.
He's one of my favorite.
I don't know if he, to be fair,
Keith Jarrett is a fucking genius.
True. Hold on. I might. 1 second. Let me get ultra technical on you
Did
for
you
one
see?
of the few times I can.
Did you see? Wait.
Oh,
Did you see the Keith Jarrett interview?
Wait, which one?
With he did this awesome interview with I forget the guy's name. He's like a big music YouTuber, Rick Beato.
Oh, I don't think so.
You should check that out. It was a great interview.
Sure.
Okay,
I
what
will
are you
say
saying now?
one thing. Technically, Keith Jarrett is not singing; they're just vocalizations, right? Because I don't think he's actually like pitch accurate. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Well, that's the important thing. I don't
Oh,
think
do you
I don't
think
really
so?
make a distinction between singing and vocalize like that. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean,
Okay.
Because think about it, like stylistically, what does it mean to sing? What you're basically saying is to sing, it means you do something with a certain technique or a certain intention. I don't think that's what singing is, because cultures all around human history have sang but haven't had those same standards of what it means to sing,
I think
or even
more-
what it means to interact with the voice. I think that
Yeah.
it's more about vocalization in general.
Well, I think more, when I say vocalization, I mean like not pitch accurate, I guess. I think I'd have to go back and watch, but I'm
Well-
pretty sure like when Keith Jarrett is playing, he's not actually like
Yeah.
singing along. He's just like, he's like making noises because of the music or whatever, right?
And that's kind of why, like, answering the question you asked is a little challenging, because when you ask me, do I think all musicians should sing? I say yes. It's not that I think all musicians should learn to sing with good technique or learn to have perfect pitch accuracy or become like, this great vocalist.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I think all musicians should be trying to internally voice what they're creating as they're creating it,
Yeah, I think that was generally the thing that I was getting at, is that like it's something that I was super like, I had a really good teacher in high school, but it's something that he focused a lot on, that like if you're playing notes, you should be able to sing them as well. Not like you said, you don't have to be like a good singer, but like if you're playing like as part of an orchestra or part of a wind ensemble, for me because we play saxophone, like you should have an idea of like be able to sing along for the pitches. Or when it comes to doing theory or whatever, like you should be able to like sing intervals and stuff. Like that's important, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Right.
internalization of music and pitch, like if you're truly going to accurately, especially once you get into like
Exactly.
extended techniques or altissimo or stuff like that, or harmonics or whatever on a horn, right? Yeah, you should have some sort of internalization there. And I do feel really strongly that like if you run into a musician, it's like,
Absolutely.
oh, like what pitch you're trying to play, and they're like, they like can't even get close to the pitch. It's like that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's one thing to be like, oh, what pitch are you trying to play, and then you can't do it mechanically. Like you don't have the vocal, coordinations or capabilities to hit that pitch. But it's another to say like, oh, you're aiming for that pitch. You can hear it internally though, right? And that's like the thing with Keith Jarrett, is he's singing the line. He's not necessarily singing the exact melody. He's not exactly singing the pitch externally. He's in the phrase. He's in the line. Like the human voice can't express the whole texture, so it ends up expressing in this abstract vocalization that's really closer to capturing the direct source of what he's trying to express than if he were actually singing the pitch perfect, with technique stuff. So I think that's a really interesting, like for example, when you hear him and he starts to get louder and like the spectral density of the piano starts to increase, he gets like buzzier and heavier. Like he's following the overall timbre and texture and movement of it. And I think that that's the important thing when, like, should musicians sing? It's not like, oh, musicians should be like singers, but
Sure.
musicians should be trying to internally voice, you know, anyway, whether it's a percussionist, whether it's like an actual whatever. It's just, you have to be engaging with it, because your motor processor and a lot of the like internal stuff, it doesn't speak the language of, like, let's say, like logic or whatever. It speaks experience. So if you're working around sound and you're giving yourself all this experience, then it internally, then it makes you just more proficient musically.
Sure.